Speaking of smoke detectors, there have been some new developments in recent years with smoke detectors.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Is that change due to vaping?
And welcome to this edition of the Temporal 3 podcast. I'm joined today by my normal co-host, Charles Aulner. Welcome, Charles.
Hello. Am I temporal 1 or temporal
You're
2 or
temporal
temporal
0,
3?
my friend.
My gosh. Okay.
We're also privileged to be joined by Mr. Bill Denney from Hochiki. Welcome, Bill.
Hello.
Hi, Bill.
Charles and Bryan. Good to see you both. How you guys doing?
Oh, we're doing good. We're doing good. We hope you are.
Doing all right.
So
Thank you.
The first
Happy
thing I'd
to
like
be
to
here.
talk about today, we're thrilled to have you. First thing I'd like to talk about today is the importance of training. Bill, from your perspective, how important is training?
For our industry, I think it's very important. Obviously, we work in a life safety industry, right? So we're designing, installing, maintaining systems that are intended to save lives, save property, and there's really nothing more important than that. If you were to try to equate it to maybe someone working on your car, for example, would you want someone working on the brakes that had no training, that didn't know what they were doing, or the steering or something like that? I see it as kind of a similar thing. You know, we want qualified people to do the important work where, lives and human public safety is there. So I think it's important, from that standpoint in a very great way. But from an employee standpoint too, I believe that an employee will appreciate the investment that their employer makes in them. They'll feel more confident, more comfortable about the work they're doing. They'll be able to do it more efficiently, more effectively, maybe with fewer callbacks, problems that could arise because of a lack of understanding of what they're doing. I mean, the benefits are on many levels, and that's one of the things I try to emphasize a lot when I do trainings. Training, knowledge, all of that is important. To be able to grow as an individual, professionally, personally, and to excel in our work.
Yeah, I think that's really an important part, Bill. Training is really a solution, not just an event. Training can help reduce callbacks. It can help with employee retention. It can help with getting the install right the first time. It can help with setting up the design correctly and code compliant. It's just on and on and on. And just like with pro athletes, professional fire alarm technicians and personnel need training continuously. Bryan, what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. And I love Bill's analogy, by the way, because my mechanic that works on my brakes, I don't think he knows what he's doing.
Hey, don't disparage mechanics now.
But yeah, I agree with Bill that, we're in the life safety business, and that's something that sometimes we forget. It is an electronic business, it is an electrical business, but more important than anything, it is the life safety business. If an electronic system were to fail, okay, there may be some inconvenience. If the electrical system were to fail, there could be some inconvenience and maybe even some possibility of danger. But if the fire alarm system fails, absolutely there's a possibility of danger, and it's really hazardous to the people in the building that are depending upon the reliability of that fire alarm system. So,
No
Bill, you
question about
mentioned the conducting training yourself, and I know Hochiki has a very sophisticated line, some bit more basic line, but also some more sophisticated lines of fire panel. How does Hochiki approach training for their product line?
Yeah, for the flagship product, the Latitude panel, there is a 3-day training course that is offered. Our customers can sign up for it on our website, HochikiAmerica.com. They have an online program that may be available for some. In person also, we'll also travel to the customer site, I understand. I'm not involved in that aspect of the training, but I do some product training too for BMS interface and suppression system control units and things like that. But we, in the very beginning, when we started with system sales, we made a decision that training was going to be required for the very reasons that we've already discussed. Try to minimize the load on tech support, try to empower the customers to make decisions and troubleshoot and work things out. It's really very important. And it's been very beneficial for us to have taken that step, I think, from the beginning all the way through.
Absolutely. When you have a highly sophisticated piece of fire alarm equipment, it's really critical that you understand what you're doing with it. Again, using the going to the brakes analogy, and I think it's a heck of a lot more sophisticated than a set of brakes. That's about the whole system, the whole car, basically, and knowing the soup, the nuts, and how to make it work.
Well, Bryan, I think from a manufacturer perspective, training can really help bad out of box issues as well.
Yeah. From our years in distribution, Charles, we saw a lot of that, didn't we?
Absolutely.
Have you
Yeah, and
experienced
I've been there
from
too.
your
I was going to
you've
say
been there
I've
too?
been there as a technician before I came to work for a manufacturer. I remember looking at a system and I thought, well, I've never been trained on this and I don't know what to do with it. But I was sent there to do something anyway. So I would have to call tech support. And they would sometimes get a little frustrated with me because I didn't know the system. I didn't know what I was doing. I knew what I needed to accomplish, but how to get there, a complete mystery. And fortunately, there were some
Abs
times where there were some very, very patient people to hold my little hand and take me through the process.
See,
Remember those people, and I appreciate it. But that's the sort of thing we want to avoid. What if I had been there in the evening and tech support had not been available? You know, I would have been
Right.
stuck.
see,
So
Bill,
knowledge
we
is power.
refer to that as one form of on the job training, which generally tends to be more expensive than other forms of training.
Yes, it is not a comfortable place to be when you're standing in front of
Not
the
at
customer.
all.
Not at all. And you have to be very diplomatic and figure out how to, I don't know, save your reputation if you can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we know the hold times. I see it on the Facebook groups all the time about people waiting ridiculously long hold times for tech support. And I think a lot of that is because there's a lack of focus on training and getting qualified people out there and saving. They don't realize, well, that guy's waiting on the phone, waiting on hold. Yeah, it's a toll free number, but he's waiting on hold, getting paid by the hour to stand there on the phone. So it's really worth the investment ahead of time to educate your people for sure.
Exactly.
Exactly. Well, the next
If
thing I
you
would
if
like to
you
talk about is smoke. Sorry, Bill.
no, I was going to say if you get stuck in a situation like that too, and you end up being at a job for 2 hours instead of 20 minutes, your day becomes much longer as a result.
Absolutely.
Extra expense.
Absolutely.
That's expensive.
Well, the next topic I'd like to talk about is NFPA 72 requirements for smoke detector location and spacing. Charles, what do you think is one of the most important things that fire alarm technicians need to know about smoke detectors and spacing and location requirements?
All detectors shall be located such that any point on the ceiling is within 0.7 of the listed spacing from a detector. So that means that in a normal application, our spacing for smoke detectors is allowed to be 30 feet.
And I'd
Now,
say
the code language is very different than our normal language on this subject.
absolutely. And do smoke detectors have a listed spacing or an accepted spacing?
They have an accepted spacing, nominal.
Nominal, yes. And
Bryan, what's that mean, nominal? In the language of the code, what are they talking about with that?
in the language of the code, and actually one of my fellow instructors pointed this out to me, that nominal, according to NFPA 72 Annex A, is plus or minus 5%, which is of 30 feet is 18 inches. But I don't point that out to people in the field, because what's going to happen is people are going to start spacing their smoke detectors at 31 and a half feet and say, well, that guy at NTC said I could do that because it's in the code.
It is in the code.
How about spacing off of sidewalls, Bill? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, thanks to our previous discussion a few minutes ago, you reminded me that the distance restriction has been removed. So now we can bring them right up against the sidewall.
Yeah, what Bill is referring to is something that they took out of the code that was in there for years and years. I've been in this business for 44 years, and I can remember, from early on in my career that I was told you never put smoke detectors closer than 4 inches from the sidewall if they're ceiling mounted, or between 4 and 12 from the ceiling if they're wall mounted. And I believe it was in 2016 they took that out, which shocked me. surprised me. And in further investigation into this topic and talking to my fellow instructors, it's interesting that evidently to get things like that changed is a pretty big deal with NFPA, that studies have to be done and all kinds of work has to be done. And somebody was able to produce a study that said it was okay to do that, but only for smokes, not for heats. The rule still applies for heat detectors.
And Bryan, I have an interesting observation for you. I'd like to get your opinion on it.
Sure.
While we were at the South Point Hotel and Casino doing the NTC conference this year, I noticed that they had a elevator recall smoke detector located near the elevators, but very close to it was just a area type smoke detector. Are they classified differently, and can an elevator recall smoke detector actually take the place of an area smoke detector?
No, unless
Or
it's
do they have to be co-located?
Yeah, I was surprised that you saw one co-located, but no, my interpretation, I mean, if they have to be within 0.7 of the center line of the door, 21 feet of the center line of the door. But if they have corridor detection, it's interesting that they had two detectors.
Yeah, because I always assumed that the elevator recall detector did double duty.
Could. Interesting. Speaking of smoke detectors, there have been some new developments in recent years with smoke detectors. Everyone out there in the field has probably noticed that a lot of manufacturers are introducing all of a sudden a whole new line of smoke detectors. And fortunately, having Bill Denney on with us today, who is an expert in this topic, put no pressure, Bill. I want to throw it to Bill to talk about the new UL 268 7th edition requirement that caused this change.
Before you throw it to Bill, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Is that change due to vaping? Now smoke detectors can detect people who vape?
I'll leave that to Bill to answer. I'm not sure.
Okay. Bill, you're on.
Yeah, that was not part of the original idea. You know, perhaps that could be in a 10th or 11th or future edition somewhere down the road. I've actually gotten calls from people asking about, like in schools, for example, vape detection or things of that sort. But anyway, back to 7th edition of 268. That had been developing for a long time. And what the industry had learned through the years is that construction materials had changed from, say, the 60s and 70s, when they were using more natural materials, wood and cotton and, linen, things like that. Through time, these became more sort of polyester, polyurethane kind of materials. And what they were finding is the fires, when a fire would occur, the fire would grow much more rapidly, and the intensity of it would be a lot stronger too. And so the smoke detectors that they were using at the time were not responding quickly enough. In homes, it was a lot of ionization type smoke detectors. But even some of the photoelectrics weren't responding as well as they should. And the reason for that is because these materials burn differently. For flaming fires, for example, the smoke is very dark. The soot particles are very small, whereas smoldering, it's a very light colored smoke, but much larger smoke particles. And so it was very difficult for the detectors to be able to detect that entire range of smoke particles, and to do it quickly enough to be a life-saving device. So there was a second part to that too, where a lot of smoke detectors were being disabled because of unwanted alarms from cooking. Someone's cooking, the detector goes off, and they say, you know what? I've had enough of that. Take the battery out or disconnect it, disable it some way. So not only do we now have
Bryan, have you had any experience with that? Bryan, have you had any experience with that?
Yeah, that's how my wife knows the food is done. That's how my wife times her cooking, is by actually using the smoke alarm. And she hates it when I tell that joke, but it's very true.
Sorry, Bill. I had to throw that out there.
You knew I was dying to say that.
No, but it was a problem because people didn't want to know that dinner was done in that way. So they would just disconnect those things. And now they have no protection at all. So we have detectors that are not detecting for the fires that are occurring based on the fuel. And then we have detectors that are being disabled. So the 7th edition of 268 introduced 3 new tests. There's a cooking nuisance test, which people hear about. They call it the hamburger test, where they actually broil a hamburger. If you look at the test, it's a certain percentage of lean to fat, certain size hamburger patty, all of this very specific that they test. And the challenge on that detector, or on that test rather, is the detector cannot go into alarm before a certain percentage of obscuration. Then they've introduced smoldering polyurethane foam and flaming polyurethane foam fires as well. So the detectors have to be able to detect that. So now the detector's got to be able to identify the type of smoke, the size of the particles, what is it coming from? Is it from cooking, or is it from an actual life-threatening fire? And then make a decision, based on that. A very challenging set of tests to have to get through.
Bill, how are manufacturers accomplishing this new detection?
Well, the 7th edition became effective, I think it was July 1st, 2024. So from that point forward, a detector cannot, a manufacturer cannot make a detector and sell it unless it has been tested and listed to the 7th edition. So that was the deadline date for us. All the smoke detector manufacturers had to go back and go through that testing. At Hochiki, they developed a detector that has 2 LEDs inside of it. Prior detectors had an infrared LED.
Wow.
So the infrared light is transmitted there into the smoke detector chamber. As the particles get in, that infrared light is scattered. Okay, it's able to pick that up. We have a fire. What they've done is they've added a second LED, a blue LED. And so infrared and blue are kind of on opposite ends of the visible light spectrum, with the blue being kind of on the higher frequency side. So the blue LED is better able to scatter on the smaller particles, whereas the infrared scatters better on the larger particles, like 0.3 to 1 micron, something like that. So it measures this reflected light. The detector is able to evaluate that and using some internal algorithms determine what kind of fire this is. What is this smoke from? Is it smoke at all? Maybe it's steam or something like that. Okay. And then it's able to make a decision based on that information. So the Hochiki analog smoke detectors and conventional smoke detectors now employ this dual LED type strategy.
Wow. So I'm guessing then you guys probably saw a pretty significant, obviously you had to meet the new UL standard, but you probably also saw a significant drop in false alarms from the products as well.
Yeah, that's part of it. That's always been an objective of Hochiki, to try to, minimize that type of thing. False alarms are a big problem. Actually, they're called unwanted alarms, I believe.
Yeah.
But but nevertheless, a big problem
Bill,
for the industry.
The big
Yes.
question from the field, Bill, I mean, reducing unwanted alarms is important for sure. How much did this change reduce the cost of the detectors? That's the important question.
Yeah, since I'm in the technical side, I'm unable to answer such questions. However, I'm sure there is an
I
answer.
see. Bryan, from your experience, upgrades in technology, do they ever result in reduced costs?
No, usually not. But I look at it this way, guys. If we reduce a unwanted alarm, to use the appropriate term, I'm sorry, it's still a false alarm to me. If we reduce unwanted alarms, and we stop the fire alarm system from crying wolf and people ignoring the fire alarm, and we don't utilize the resources, the very limited resources of the first responders, having them respond to that unwanted alarm, and we avoid false alarm fines and embarrassment to our customers, the additional cost is worth it to be able to get a more reliable system. And again, in the life safety business,
and more effective at the same time.
Yeah. And my big thing about life safety, and Charles, you've seen this one. I always, when you do classes with fire alarm people, NICET classes or whatever, when the fire alarm goes off, what do all the fire alarm people do? They look at each other and say, it's probably a false alarm. I'm not getting up.
Yeah.
So
that's what
that is something we don't want the lay people to do. And if you have consistent false alarms, they eventually get immune to it, think it's a false alarm. Increasing that reliability, in my opinion, is worth a small increase in cost.
For sure.
Well, excellent. All right, guys. We'll want to thank everybody for participating today. Bill, thank you again for your telling us all about UL 268 7th edition. Very informative. I always wondered how that was accomplished, how they were meeting those new requirements. Interesting, too, about the breakdown of the hamburger. I'm going to have to get some UL 268 7th edition smoke detectors and have my wife test them out to see if they really are immune to her false alarms. I'll let you know how that works.
Good luck.
There you
Bill,
go.
thank you
There you
again.
go.
Charles,
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah.
all right.
Absolutely,
Well,
guys.
that
Good to
concludes.
see you. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thanks.